we haven't seen, well, on the enterprise side, like I think that's what you're talking about, institutional side. Like I don't think an L2 is going to be appealing.
Mm.
They need to buy and burn ETH. Um, the WeWork example is a really good example. Like these apps already have product market fit. Like they don't need your security. They have more security than you potentially. So like they don't care about that. What they do care about is something like, hey, how can I build a stable architecture and stable blockchain fast? And Subnet's a great example.
GM, so just a quick one before we get started. So, Still Early is a podcast for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered as financial advice. Any investment decision you should make should be based on your own research and your own understanding of the risks involved. So, yeah, that's it from me. Let's get on with the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of Still Early. Today we're joined by the one and only Luigi from Ava Labs. Sir, how are you doing? Thanks so much for jumping on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm doing quite well. Happy to be here. I know we've been planning this for a minute, so I decided to get up on here.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on over your neck of the woods, so I'm finally glad we got to nail it down. There's a million one things we want to get into, but yeah, how have you been the past couple of weeks? It's all been going on on your end?
So we're recording this middle of October. I don't know when it drops, but it's been a pretty crazy few weeks for me, to say the least. Obviously, the Stars Arena stuff was um, thrilling, exhausting at the same time, and sort of picking up the pieces of all that and seeing how we can help support was definitely something that required a lot of time, a lot of patience, and so yeah, I'm good now. I'm feeling better now, but it was a crazy few weeks. I was actually traveling. I was at ETH Milan conference during the whole fiasco. So there's a funny story about that, but we can get into that whenever.
So you keep getting some sleep, and yeah, I've got a lot of questions around this because it's kind of took the full industry by storm, which is really impressive to see. So I'm sure we'll get into that in a minute. But why don't we take it a step back a little bit before we like go full throttle and go forward? So how have you came to be in this position you are at Ava Labs? Was there any kind of, I know there isn't a traditional background to worker in this industry. There's some kind of loosely adjacently corresponding industries that might lend itself well to working in this weird and wonderful world. But is there any kind of like interesting backstory that's led you to where you are now?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I could give I guess my a brief background on my story. So, was always a finance sort of major out of school. First job out of school was at Citigroup. I was there for about 6 years or so. In a number of different capacities. I traded credit instruments and equities, and handled a bunch of different stuff. Initially, in my career on the middle office side of things, because I actually graduated right after the crisis. So, not a great time to graduate with a finance degree. But like got kind of exhausted by quote unquote working on Wall Street, so to speak. It was very taxing on the body and the mind in a lot of ways, and I was very interested in crypto since like 2011, mainly Bitcoin. I remember sitting on one of the desks and talking to one of my colleagues about Bitcoin when I saw the white paper and just like being amazed by it. I bought it immediately and then sold it when Apple Pay came out, thinking that the whole thesis was over. So I revisited it a number of times after that, but that was the initial foray. And then one of my really good friends told me about Ethereum, I think in like 2015 or so. And I started attending a lot of the ETH meetups. Was really fascinated by the potential of what we could build on something like EVM. And I actually started my own sort of startup in the crypto space back in like, I think it was 2017. We were building, funny enough, something like a SocialFi type of application. And we're actually building it on our chain using Rolang. So for anybody who's been around for a minute, that'll tickle some senses. And did that for a few years, and that's really where I think I learned a lot about, number one, blockchain infrastructure, two, tokenomics. Like I just went down every single rabbit hole in the space at that time, and there was no real infrastructure, right? Like there was no Uniswap, there weren't any oracles, there was nothing like to work with. at the time, and so you really had to build a bare bones. You had to build everything bare bones from the start. Um, so just given my background with finance, product, and the crypto space, and like understanding a lot of the different elements of also scalable blockchains, when DeFi came around, I was obviously um, very interested in it and engaged, and also like was probably one of the early people participating in DeFi as a whole. And then when Avalanche was looking for somebody to come in and sort of spearhead that operation, that was something I was very interested in doing. Came in and did that about a little over 2.5 years ago now. I'm with the firm. So mainly leading our DeFi operations. I had a lot to do with something like Avalanche Rush, and then now also took over our DevRel sort of operations earlier in the year. And yeah, it's been a fun ride. Not one not for somebody who likes to sleep, or likes to relax, but with that said, like very rewarding, very exciting, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can't imagine any 2 days are the same.
They're not, no. And it's like you could sort of feel things bubbling up sometimes, like something's going to happen soon. Something's going to happen soon. Whether it's good or bad, you never know. And we just kind of take everything in stride. I have a great team. I love the people I work with, and we've got a great community too. So it's been fun to watch sort of this really cool story of Avalanche develop since I've been here, even from the beginning. And I think it's got a lot to offer. And yeah, I'm really enjoying myself.
Yeah, you touched upon it a little bit there with Avalanche Rush. Like, I always say, if you could drop me back into any point in time of my complete degenerate career, that would be it. It was literally the best time to be on chain. I don't care what anyone says. It was like as you say, no sleep at all. There was so much shit happening all at once. It was like incredible. And what was it like from the inside when all that was going on? Because there was just like a hive of activity. It captured everyone's mind share and attention. And did you expect it to be as big and like, as successful as it initially was?
It's a good question. I got hired, I think, in like it was April, and we dropped the program, like announced it officially in August. We had it ready for a while. If whoever doesn't remember, we had Ave, Curve, Sushi, all these guys coming over, and we sort of, I think, did a really good job of like bringing attention to the chain. And the overall goal of Avalanche Rush is pretty simple. Like, I don't know if anybody remembers, but pre L2s, like having fast finality on the EVM was very cool, because using Ethereum mainnet was pretty slow. Like, submit a transaction, you know, go grab 3 sips of your coffee, maybe another 5, and then you're like, oh, for the love of God, and so with this, it was like, hey, let's show everybody, let's use this as a way to show everybody what Avalanche Consensus can do for the UX of using a blockchain. That was one of the ideas. Obviously, notwithstanding building the DeFi ecosystem, liquidity, all these other things as well. And that was like, at the same time, we also deployed our bridge, which at that time was like best in class in UX. And, I think the combination of that experience and that integrated experience in a lot of ways, like really, made people excited, right? So a lot of people have dropped different types of programs before, but they haven't gotten traction because the program in and itself isn't what gains traction. It's like a combination of multiple factors. So we had, Benki was already live with its own incentive program. We had the promise of a future incentive program. We had great UX in terms of the chain as well as the bridge. And like everybody came and was just like, oh, okay, wow, like let's build on this thing. And so they did. And, I guess we had a really good sense that it was going to make noise. I don't think I had an idea that it was going to like, take off like that. I mean, my life changed after that program was announced in a lot of ways. It was funny. I don't know how many people remember this, but there was this 1 month, maybe a little bit longer of a 1 month period after Avalanche Rush was announced from when Ave actually deployed, where like my life was not fun. I got absolutely crushed by everybody. on a day in and day out basis. I actually told, funny story, I told the Stars Arena guys like last week. I was like, listen, everybody's going to come like to your doorstep and with pitchforks every day that the thing's not live. But like once it's live and it's working, nobody's going to remember that 1 week time that it was down. They won't really remember it. And that was, from the experience that I had, but magnified times five. And, I think a little bit more public at the time. So just some lessons along the way. You have to be steadfast in the way you're thinking and just kind of, be a big boy in a lot of ways, be able to handle stuff.
Yeah. How difficult is user and developer acquisition in such a short attention span industry that we work in? Because obviously, like incentive programs around what you guys did with Rush have definitely had a positive impact on the ecosystem. I've seen others try and do it, and just because they're giving out incentives, there's been no retention or no kind of stickiness there. So like how getting a user over is one thing, but again, if you're heading up developer relations as well, like how hard is it to get great builders to be building in a specific ecosystem as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we learned a lot from from the initial foray, right? So a lot of people forget, but Avalanche is not like this EVM chain. It's not an EVM fork. It used an example of the EVM with Avalanche Consensus as its first, like, hey, like, here's an example of what Avalanche can do with the EVM. And, for better or worse, that actually has some certain trade offs. One, developers are less sticky on the EVM in general because they can migrate to many chains, or they're actually omni-chain, so to speak, right? They're deployed everywhere. So it's like hard to actually calculate who's building on what chain. I think as the space migrates, what you're actually going to see, what you're starting to see, is that developers will build on their own chains, and where they build on their own chains is where you actually have developer acquisition. So whether that's something like a subnet or something like OP Stack or Cosmos Zone or whatever that is, like that's where you're going to be able to kind of get a better idea of like, okay, where are the developers actually building? No difference than like, are you building your app on AWS or GCP or whatever? I think it's going to look like something like that. But developer acquisition is quite hard. I think we've started to see some real traction this year with some of the initiatives that we've brought out, like the Avalanche Academy is one of the new things we've rolled out this year, which is like a self-paced learning courses. I think there's 3 courses right now with 3 slated to be added in the coming months. And, you get your own certificate. You can show, that you're competent in different types of things. And this really allows us a better way to engage the developer from the perspective of, something that's, more fluid than documentation. We've also noticed the drop off in some of the obvious questions that we were getting in the past for those who are taking the academy, which is really nice to see. And so, I think that's one basic thing, but we have a number of initiatives going on the technical side that are starting to really pique developers' interest. So, a few things. One, we have precompiles for the EVM. So precompile EVM, we call it. That's for a subnet. You want to deploy a subnet. This is something that allows you to modify the state of the EVM and sort of have different types of triggers on the administrative layer that allow you to like get more performance or modify the actual environment a little bit. And that's something that some developers like to tinker with, and that's a differentiator. Outside of that, we have something called a Hyper SDK. This is basically, our in-house built SDK for people who want to customize. This is non-EVM at all, just a caveat. It has nothing to do with EVM. And this thing is much faster than something like EVM. Makes different trade-offs. And we're seeing a number of developers migrate and try to build on top of that as well. So I think as we've differentiated our tech stack, we've sort of seen more developer engagement and interest with that stack.
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is you're starting to see these kind of hybrid chains come online. And I know I think it's Eclipse like launched a couple of weeks back. But I suppose with the infrastructure that's available on Avalanche and with the SDKs, something where they're creating this Frankenstein chain with like a Rust developer environment and then consensus on Celestia or whatever, however that stack looks. So how does Avalanche enable something akin to that in its current setup?
I like to tell people like the subnet, the way it's designed right now is like very customizable. Like there's a lot you can do with it. There's actually a team called NodeKit building. They're using a subnet with the Hyper SDK to build a shared sequencer for a bunch of other rollups outside of Avalanche. Like that's your example. You know, if you want to use your Frankenstein analogy, like that's entirely possible with the subnet as the back end, leveraging Avalanche consensus. So you know, all that stuff is very possible with subnets. You know, I think it remains to be seen which way the industry goes. I'm really intrigued to see like sort of this modular stack play out and see like, okay, you can do all this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like make it better. You know, I've seen us in this space take a lot of different approaches that are more complex, that you know have much more dependencies, and at the end of the day, like people revert back to, all right, let me just deploy my own blockchain. You know, it's a it ends up being simpler, and so I'm curious to see like that play out. I think we have the ability to sort of capitalize on whichever way the stack goes. You know, with the Hyper SDK, you have something super optimized, you know, akin to something like the Solana VM, but for your own blockchain. And then, you know, with Subnet EVM, you have the ability to like keep your existing application code and everything that you already have, deploy it as your own chain and sort of get more scale from that. And not only scale, but you have like the ability to sort of design your own chain is much more open, whether it's tokenomics, whether it's like UX, all this kind of stuff is definitely more open. And you know, with Avalanche Swart messaging, you get the ability to interconnect with whether it's a Hyper SDK subnet or a Move subnet or an EVM subnet. That's all sort of integrated within the overall network.
Yeah, we recorded with Fish from Trader Joel last week on episode 1 of this, and he's obviously extremely close to what's happening in the DEX space and how that landscape's going to develop. And he's kind of adamant that a lot of the innovation at the AMM level is kind of done. You're seeing a lot of RFQs trying to sneak in there. I think Uniswap with Uniswap X are effectively saying we don't know if this is going to work. We might end up pivoting to RFQ. But he was saying, particularly what you were just saying at the kind of consensus layer, I think the next level of innovation for DEX is going to be being able to control what happens effectively under the hood and not just at the application layer. And he feels like that's going to be pivotal for the industry to move forward, particularly for AMM. So it's interesting to see that people who are so close to it are thinking in that way, and Avalanche obviously with the flexibility to actually enable that puts them in good stead. And you know, I'm not really a fan of what's happening at Uniswap at the minute. I think they're just slapping a load of business licenses on IP that's already been generated. And there's a lot of talk about like how they're kind of pivoting away from the MM. So I don't know, but it's interesting to see that people who, if they wanted to build in that space and have the control of the full complete tech stack as opposed to just the application layer, then Avalanche actually enables that. So interesting to see how that develops. But I don't know if you've had any conversations along those lines.
So, I mean, you know, for anybody who was involved in finance, you know, when they saw Uni V2, I don't think anybody was like, wow, like this is crazy. You know, it's like, wow, this is pretty basic. You know, like this is like not going to work. It's cool because, you know, we were able to do stuff on chain and all that stuff, but like it would never work at scale in something, you know, in finance. You know, we have clubs for a reason, central limit order book exchanges. And basically what you're seeing is concentrated AMM basically, you know, in so many ways maneuvered to become very similar to a club. And I think that makes a lot of sense. It still provides benefits. Like I still think the composable nature of taking like the LP token and being able to do things with it is new. That's an innovation. You know, it's hard to do with a club in and itself. but I think we're at a place now in the DEX space where we have things like DEX a lot, which is central limit order book exchange on its own subnet. We have things like Trader Joe and their AMM, which is really cool and fast and very cheap, which is have been really delighted to use that. And then we have things like Cavalry, which is a new Avalanche app coming out, and they're sort of finding their way and trying to build pools with tons and tons and tons of different assets. So there's still experimentation happening in the DEX space, and there should be. I would just say like we're definitely squeezing the last bit of juice out of there for now. Until there's different types of breakthroughs in research going forward.
Yeah, I suppose you must see a lot of stuff being in the position that you're in, and before I suppose the rest of the industry and the user base sees it. But is there anything in particular that you're extremely excited by that maybe people aren't really fully aware of at this point in time?
In general, or
Yeah,
like
just
on the
anything that's
DeFi
coming
side?
across the desk or anything. Yeah, but let's
Oh,
if we start in DeFi, and then maybe if there's anything broader, because I'm a bit of a DeFi nut, but again, the consumer app and social application thing has kind of captured my attention an awful lot. So
yeah. I mean, I've always had this opinion that DeFi is basically going to be like the top of the funnel for all the other applications. Like it'll just work with everything else. I don't think it's going to be the focus point of everything else. And so, like, I have to be honest. Like, I haven't seen much that's knocked my socks off in a while in DeFi. I think we've sort of had a innovation sort of lull for a while. Um, and I think that comes naturally. Like we built the basic primitives, we are optimizing them, and now it's a matter of taking stock and be like, okay, like there is one app that I can't mention that is coming soon that I'm very excited about. It won't be the type of app that like you know will blow your mind forever, but it's like a very very well designed add on to a lending platform that you're like, wow, we brought in some real finance guys to build something that we needed, and here it is. So I think you're going to see continuous things like that. But like, being able to borrow and lend, under collateralized would be really cool. Nobody solved this. Nobody still solved identity, which is a big problem in terms of the space. Like that was a problem in like 2016. ICO days. Everybody was like raising a bunch of money for that, and still nobody's like shipped something that is, you know, that's gained share. So I've been excited by the social stuff. Coming. I like I said, I built a social app in 2017, so it's obviously near and dear to my heart. And I've always felt like this space was really well tuned for it. So I've been saying for a while internally, like we're going to see. Like I was like, we need a SocialFi team. I didn't call it SocialFi. I call it a social team. I'm like, this is going to be a space that starts to eventually come together. Problem was, I said that like 2 years ago, so it didn't happen for a minute. I was still thinking about Steemit. If anybody's been around for a while, play with Steemit back in the day, the old crypto app.
yeah, it's always you see a lot of people scrambling last minute, and like the amount of like pitch decks I see personally that have came off the back of like Frentech and Stars Arena and stuff like that. It's like, oh God, here we go. But
Yeah,
again, I'm at least it's kind of, as you say, put a bit of you know a bit of interest into like new development and opened the design space a little bit. Whereas I think we got to the point where, as we've both touched upon, it was iterations of forks, and yes, there was some innovation happening, but it was very iterative, and this feels like it's kind of came out of left field and definitely captured some people's attention where people might have been getting a little bit bored with what was currently available. So yeah, why do you think it has captured the attention of so many people so much? And I think we should focus in on Stars Arena and yeah, what can you put your finger on it?
good question. When Frentech came out, I got pretty excited. You know, I was a little scared initially, just because like I was a little nervous using my own personal account and all that kind of stuff. Didn't really know how everything was going to be. sort of track and handle and all that stuff. But when it came out, I was like, finally, like here we go. Now people's minds can be open to the idea of what you could do with different types of social applications. Because one thing crypto's really good at is accelerating the timeline to build a network, like a human network. It's really, really good at this. It also accelerates the time to kill a network at the same time. So it's it's really good at bootstrapping, and then you need to get to a sustainable pace. And you can do that if product is good. But if product's not good, it's sort of this up and down type of thing. So what I saw there was like, okay, I don't know if the end game is like this idea of trading your friends, but I do know that like the idea of incorporating sort of DeFi elements into social is something that I think people will like, right? People like to count their followers. They like to, look at how much traction their Instagram post made or their TikTok stuff. And, there's no reason that integrating, number one, the crypto payment rails, but also the crypto economic stuff into that wouldn't work. Like, especially, and this is the key element, especially if you could solve for the onboarding, because like that was the challenge, being like, hey, I want to use some crypto Hinge app, and then like you go use it and it takes like 25 minutes to just get set up. Like it's not going to happen. So, I think Friend Tech did a really good job of leading the way there. And then I think Stars Arena did a fantastic job of making the onboarding really easy. Like when I was in Milan for that week that it was exploding, I must have onboarded like 10 people who were friends, just like showing them the app. And it was like 2 seconds. It was just like onboarding somebody on like, Snapchat back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was like anecdotes of people sat on planes and trains. I think they were coming back from the conference or going to the conference, and like, yeah, just signed someone up, got the ref link out, and then it's one of those things where it piques your interest. And like, I do not want to be late to the next kind of movement, so everyone's like happy to just jump on board. And I think where it really excelled, particularly Stars Arena, was opening up that public feed. The tipping was great, genius as well. I think it was some ridiculous number of transactions on C chain were primarily coming through Stars Arena at one point, and it was just like, yeah, this is really, really, really cool. And I think it should be a more social experience, and I think the public feed really lends itself well to that. But again, that onboarding experience, the first time like with Friends Tech, I thought I must have missed a step here. This didn't feel like a crypto UX onboarding experience whatsoever, but it was, and that was like kind of refreshing to see after years and years of just painstakingly putting up with the likes of MetaMask. So I think that onboarding experience was enough to kind of get a lot of people's mind and attention focused on the actual app in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying. Like a lot of the features are quite good. It remains to be seen. Sort of what comes out of this whole thing. But it's funny. I think the arena name, came from like obviously this Theodore Roosevelt quote. I think that I kept posting, because like it's 2023. It's been a long bear market. I remember 2019 distinctly, and there was nothing to do really. There was very little to do on chain, and it was hard to stick around. Like your friends were all like getting better jobs, they were making money elsewhere, they were like having a chill life, and here you are grinding on like the hopes of Compound, the hopes of Uniswap eventually coming, and this is how this feels in a lot of ways, and so being in the arena, trying things in the sense of like, all right, like this might not be the end form of the application that everybody ends up adopting or using, but this, I feel like this is something to pay attention to at, writ large, like this movement, this sort of, new play in the space, and somebody, I don't know who, but I think somebody will take the basics of what has been developed here and build, an application that can be used at scale. And if they do that, it'll be the first time that I think crypto has, an actual widely used use case, and that's why I'm excited. I don't know who it'll be. I don't know which app it'll be. I don't know where it'll happen. But like, it makes sense to pay attention. In general.
Do you think that vision comes from within inside the industry and then it cuts through, or do you think that comes from an established product that has ridiculous distribution and then integrates? Like, what do you think is more likely to happen?
Fantastic question. Like I've sort of debated myself with this, over the years, whether or not the incumbents will adopt the tech or whether or not, you know, it's needed for the. I think it really depends on the business model.
Hmm.
In this scenario, like let's say trading tickets or whatever becomes something that gets well adopted, um, it could work in a way where it doesn't disrupt the existing business model. And if somebody like Elon is, humble enough to look at it and use it, then there's no reason that they wouldn't be able to do it. But it does feel like, in a lot of ways, and I'm not sure I thought this would happen when Elon took over initially, but it does feel like that there's a growing sense of like tearing down the establishment of existing social media platforms. Like I have been saying for a long time that I thought that a lot of these sort of marketplace Web 2 applications were the ones to be well disintermediated by crypto, like the Facebooks, the Airbnbs, the Ubers. Like I've always thought that these were like very obvious. I know that they're hard, and there's like a million challenges with doing so, but the business model from the get go, is very, it extracts a lot from the users. And so because of that, crypto could build an interesting model, and because of the acceleration of a network effect, like it has the best chance of sort of dethroning some of these other guys. So I think my guess today is it's likely not to be an incumbent, at least in the beginning. But I think either would be cool.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. So there's another kind of large looming area of the industry that's been kind of flourishing, particularly over the past, I'd say, 12 months. And that's real world assets in RWAs, which I hate the terminology around it. And I got told off at Token 2049 about this by a big protocol that I'm building in this space, probably the biggest.
What did they say to you?
So I basically posted that real world assets has less syllables than RWAs. So I don't know why we shorten it and abbreviate it. And both terminology is stupid, and it's like marginalizes us again as an industry by calling them real world assets. And I don't think it's a great terminology, to be honest. I'll tell you off who it was. But
it's a bad term.
Yeah. And I think you've had a similar thought around this, and I'd love to kind of see what's happening in the Avalanche ecosystem, if there's anything that you're seeing, if there's anything, even just your personal thoughts on it. Like, where do you think and how do you think this plays out?
So, I mean, the reason real world assets is a bad term is because, RWA stands for risk weighted assets in TradFi. So when you go approach somebody new about this, they have no idea what you're talking about. And also like real world assets. Like think about that. The U.S. dollar is a real world asset. I don't know. Is it like it's just a bad terminology because it's literally called fiat money. So I don't know if we'd call it real world, and it's based on faith. And so, anyways, like not. I do think as an industry we have a really, really, really bad way of having creating nomenclature. And as an industry, one thing we do really bad is sort of getting together. And like pushing the overall agenda of the industry together. Instead, what you have is like 15 different entities trying to kill each other to advance something, and it's not great. It doesn't create anything super cohesive. So net, what I'd say is like our terminology that we've adopted internally is when you tokenize something that already exists in the TradFi market, we call it tokenizing off-chain assets, right? OCAs. It's very simple. You tokenize something that's already off-chain, you bring it on-chain, right? And then when it's on chain, you can call it chained assets, or you could just call it an asset. But I do think there will be a long-term distinction between something that's on chain and not on chain, just like something's online and not online. And I think that's going to be the distinction versus real world assets. I think we're still very early on this world, and Avalanche as a whole has really led in this space. I think we have we've announced things like the Spruce Network in collaboration with Wisdom Tree, Wellington, and Tiro. We have a number of initiatives underway that'll be public in near future. And we have the Avalanche Vista Fund, which is $50 million from the foundation, dedicated to buying up sort of these types of assets. But net, like there's still a lot of work to be done in order to make this, a value add for the actual sort of existing industry. Like if you take something that's already off chain and you bring it on chain, now you're managing two ledgers. You're increasing the work. You're not actually getting the benefits of a tokenized asset, like, for example, automated cash flows, automated margin, all this other stuff, because you're still maintaining the second ledger. And I understand like this is a parallel process for the short term, but it still is like not ideal from like a longer term perspective. So until we can get native assets issued on chain, until we can get sort of assets being tokenized on chain where sort of the data and the overall settlement of the asset is also comes with it, we still have a long way to go. I know everybody's excited about T-bills on chain. I think it's cool to bring some yield on chain. With that, there's still like, regulatory uncertainty. There still is like a gray area in terms of who can touch it. I'm in the US, probably can't touch any of this stuff. But I'm excited to see us experimenting with different collateral in general. I just think, we're earlier than a lot of people wanted on that front.
Yeah, 100%. And another kind of, it's been the talk of the town for the past 12, 18 months, but we're seeing an awful lot of development in the Ethereum L2 space, right? But my concerns around how rapidly this is evolving is I feel like a lot of projects are using it as a bit of a escape hatch to kind of say, look, we're still building. We're just going to create an L2. Yeah. Is it necessarily needed? I'm not entirely sure a lot of them are. We've also got a huge liquidity fragmentation issue. And obviously there's a lot of interop being built. But how does Avalanche position itself against, or as like a kind of antidote to that increased fragmentation across what we're seeing across different other ecosystems? I'd love to kind of pick your brain and get the information straight from the source effectively.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So, with respect to Ethereum and its L2 roadmap, this is something that, they've been planning for a while, been working on for a while. I think, L2s have certain merits. They're still like, as Vitalik and a lot of people say, on training wheels. But the reason there's fragmentation is you're seeing like 10 different general purpose L2s launching. Don't really need that. There is a demand for this right now. Like we don't have demand for 20 different DeFi ecosystems today, but what you have is a lot of, people who want to sell tokens, get rich, make money, and also there's the prize to be one of the few standing is large. And this is what I was referring to in the beginning where like, as an industry, we don't do a good job of like pushing the greater good. Instead, we all try to like tear each other down and kill each other and, see who stands. So I think like the reason we have liquidity fragmentation is because we have too many general purpose L2s. Like there is not enough activity on Base, on Optimism, on Arbitrum, on whichever Polygon's live now. Like there's not enough activity for all these DeFi ecosystems, let alone ETH mainnet. I think I saw Gwei drop below like 10. There's just not, there's no demand for this stuff, and we keep building the same thing. I went to a conference and I saw like 5 chains I've never heard of, talking about their new DeFi incentive program like it's 2021. I was just like, man, just like, wow. Yeah. It's It's exhausting, really, because it's like,
Yeah.
man, like, we're just, it's just a wrong, like, the one thing this space hasn't done well is it doesn't have a good allocation of resources. Like, that's not what we need people to build. Like, infrastructure is pretty good these days. Like, um, you know, Avalanche works really well. Some L2s work decently. Solana's working better. Infrastructure is working. You want your own chain, you could deploy a subnet in 10 minutes. That's great. But you're not going to have, in my opinion, 100 general purpose subnets. You have the Avalanche C chain, which is a hub, you know, and then everything else will flow from there. So you have subnets like, Gunzilla building their game off the grid. You have like the TSM subnet that's coming. Something like Hubble, which is like a perp exchange, Dexalot subnet. These are different use cases and app chains, but all liquidity flowing from the C chain and all those subnets being able to talk to each other in an interoperable way via AWM is the powerful nature, right? Like, what's nice about something like AWM that a lot of people don't talk about is, like, let's say I have Dexalot subnet, and then I have like off the grid subnet or TSM subnet. The only validators involved in that transaction between them are each other's validators. So you don't introduce this new trust assumption that third party bridges typically do. And that's really working in our conversations with different folks about deploying subnets. And, there's still work to be done. I know there's a lot of community conversation on like the cost of deploying a subnet, stuff like that. That's stuff that we hope to address. But in general, like I would say on the infrastructure side, you don't need this many L2s. I have a number of issues with L2s in general, as the preferred choice. If you want, we can go into those. If not, like, I think we positioned why I think Avalanche has a good sort of architecture to capitalize on an app chain world.
Yeah, I'd love to again just like double click on your own kind of personal reasons around that, because as I say, it's a lot of conversations, particularly online with algorithms and stuff like that. We find ourselves in an echo chamber, and it's always good to open up the discussion. And people get blindsided by a lot of stuff that they absolutely know nothing about. So I'd love to kind of just pick your brain on that if you've got the time to get into it.
So here's my thoughts. I have a few fundamental issues with the idea of L2s as a loan scaling solution. So I want to make sure I'm specific in my answers and I'm not painting with a broad brush. As a loan scaling solution, uh, fundamentally everything built on one layer, doesn't introduce much fault isolation, right? So if ETH mainnet ever has an issue, the whole thing crashes. The whole thing, comes to a halt. When I say an issue, I mean a real issue. Like, and that's possible. Like ETH2 is, a year old as a proof of stake network. So, anything can happen there. So building on top of one layer to me is just inherently dangerous and creates this sort of house of cards. Whereas if you pull out one card, everything crumble. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not, but fundamentally, I don't like that type of architecture. Like, I like fault isolation. Um, so that's one issue I have. The other issue I think they're going to have, and I don't think they thought of the design. I don't think they thought of this in the design, was the economic considerations that need to be taken in, that need to be taken into account when you think about an L2. So let's say I'm something like TSM and I want to deploy an L2, my own L2 app chain, right? Um, and let's say today, I have that deployed and I have a bunch of users and, whatever the cost is, it is. But let's say today's FOMC day, right? Jerome Powell's going to get up there and have a big speech. Markets are going to go crazy geopolitically, like macro is going to move a lot. How does it make sense that my gaming users on my L2 all of a sudden at 2 p.m. Eastern are paying a much higher price for each one of their transactions because ETH L1 block space is totally eaten up? Fundamentally, that is not an app chain. That doesn't isolate performance. That doesn't isolate sort of costs and fees. And I call this the variable fee issue for L2s and L3s. And I know that they have things to address this with like proto-date sharding and stuff, which should reduce the cost. But that the reduction of cost is just relative. and we're in a bear market. Like nobody's using Eco One. When they're all using it, and because it has the most liquidity, people will use it. Then I think that you're going to constantly run into this issue. And so, what their solution will be? Their solution will be, okay, well, let's move this to an L3. Great. We have now like whatever, I don't know, 12-day finality, 4 times faster than TradFi. And, we still, at a smaller scale, but we still have this fundamental same issue that the fees are variable to exogenous activity. And that's not something that anybody ever talks about. For some reason, that makes no sense to me. And so a lot of times I use this analogy that like deploying your own L2 as an app chain is like renting an office in WeWork. You might do this if you have no product market fit yet. You don't even know if you're going to be here in a month. Like you might just roll your quick L2. But once you have like users and everything's like popping off, you're not going to be at WeWork anymore. It's too expensive. You're paying a huge premium for convenience and infrastructure, and you're not going to pay that anymore. You're going to move over to your own office, and which I think will be your own true app chain. So that's my view, at the current state of things and the issues that I see with it. With that said, I think a lot of the ZK tech on the roll up side is really, really interesting, but just not sure it's like the right tech for scaling in general. Maybe it could be the right tech for like bridges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. That makes a lot of sense. And again, it's nice to hear both sides of the argument. So you touched on gaming a little bit there. I interviewed Mark from Shrapnel the other day, and that's legit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, very legit. Very legit. Very legit.
You mentioned off
and
the
great
grid.
team. Great team, man. Like they are
so cool.
They are on top of their subnet, and they're I've been very impressed with their, I guess, like ability to think ahead in the architecture.
Yeah, have you been close to that much?
I don't run the gaming stuff. I sort of look at it from a periphery view. But I'm excited for it to launch. Let's put it that way. Like I feel like Off the Grid's been in development for 4 years, so it's supposed to go live soon. But these games take a minute to build, and for Avalanche in general, like we want to show what a subnet can do, and we think that these might be a way to do that.
Yeah, and the TSM is huge as well, isn't it?
Pretty cool. Blitz app as a subnet is pretty neat, and they have some interesting, I think, surprises that'll engage a lot of users, a lot of non-crypto users. To be very clear, like that's who's going to use this stuff. And so I think one thing Avalanche is doing as a whole is, rather than fighting over the same 100,000 crypto users, if even, we're trying to find new use cases to bring different people in. That's been our focus for a while now.
And what's I know you might be adjacent to this, but what's the main reasons that these big names are choosing Avalanche over whatever else might be out there? Is there any kind of recurring theme that you guys are hearing internally that ticks the boxes for them?
So I think we haven't seen, well, on the enterprise side, like I think that's what you're talking about, institutional side. Like I don't think an L2 is going to be appealing. They need to buy and burn ETH. The WeWork example is a really good example. Like these apps already have product market fit. Like they don't need your security. They have more security than you potentially. So like they don't care about that. What they do care about is something like, hey, how can I build a stable architecture and stable blockchain fast? And Subnet's a great example of that. Like so with things like Alpha Cloud coming online, where you're able to like write into a GUI, deploy your own subnet in like 5 minutes with different customizations. We have a team internally at Ava Labs that's thinking with that in mind. And also, we've inherited many different, I guess, deals from enterprises who have chosen a different provider, and then have used that tech and then said, you know what, like we're going to come build a subnet. Like this other stuff isn't really working. It's not ready. And so I think just being the boring, stable guy sometimes has worked for us. And I think the team is very professional, and that helps as well.
We've got around 5 minutes left. So one question and then a couple of quick fires, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
So, if you weren't in this current position now, with everything that's going on in the world, what do you think you'd be focusing your attention on and building?
That's a good question. I've been very intrigued by sort of the social fi stuff and different ways that crypto can like help like third world countries. Um, that's something that I've been really intrigued by. But I guess like I'm still in the mindset of like I want to build something that like gets to market and scales and like shows that this tech can actually be adopted. Like that's where my head's at. If I'm not doing that, I'm probably like going to become a chef or something like that. Like I don't know. I mean, like I don't know what else I'd be doing. Right now, this is the thing that excites me and gets me up in the morning. So that's the thing that I'll do. And I feel like I'm adding value. So if I ever feel like I'm not adding value, I probably won't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great answer. So, quickfire. Apple or Android?
Apple, always.
What stablecoin do you prefer to hold?
Oh, no. Because I am in the US, USDC.
Books or audiobooks?
Interesting. I prefer audiobooks now.
Same. And how many coffees a day is the right amount?
For me, 3, maybe 4.
I feel like this one's going to be... I feel like I'm going to offend you with this last one. Pineapple on pizza?
It's interesting. I was in Italy a few times and, over the past few months, and they're putting weird shit on pizza too. It's like, and I'm cool for the experimentation. I get it, but like, don't come at me. Don't come at me with this like pineapple supposed to be on pizza stuff. Like, it's fine if you want that as an adjacent thing, but let's keep the margarita nice and clean.
I'm in Spain at the minute, and they quite like egg on pizza, like a fried egg.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I'm not a fan.
No. Are you gonna? You must be in Barcelona soon. Is that right?
No, I will be in Istanbul for the Avalanche house that we have November 14th during Dev Connect week.
Yeah, and we're going to be coming out. I think me, Jerry, and Dan are going to fly.
Nice.
First time in Istanbul, to be fair.
Me too.
I'm really looking forward to it.
I've never been.
Yeah, my friends are there at the minute, and they've just sent me the food that they've been indulging on the past couple of days, and they feel like 30 kilos heavier.
Yeah, we'll have to. Travel in general is not good for the body. I like to say I'm like maybe older in this space than many others. I'll be 35 soon, so there's like I can't really grind with the rest of them, in terms of the travel. So I'm trying to limit my travel a little bit more than I used to the last 2 years.
Yeah, 100%. Is there anything I might have missed off that you'd want to kind of leave the listeners or viewers with? If there's anything that you kind of want to focus people's mind and attention on, or equally we can just wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we hit a lot of the cool points. The Stars Arena stuff was fun, different stuff with different tech and infrastructure. So, I think we hit on a lot of different points.
Awesome. Well, if you've enjoyed that one, please give us a like and subscribe. My editor will kill me if I don't ask for this, even though I hate asking, but you're going to have to do it anyway. So do us a favor and do that. And Luigi, thanks so much. And again, open invite if you want to come back on. I'm sure there's going to be a million different developments that happen over the next 12 months. So again, thanks for joining us. And as I said, there's an open invite.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take it easy, everyone. Speak to you next time. All right, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on for next time. See ya.